Secretary. To all the other officials of DepEd and heads of attached agencies, welcome to the House of Representatives. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize Representative Zamora, Vice Chairperson of the Committee on Appropriations, to answer questions on the proposed budget of the Department of Education.
Representative Zamora, the Honorable Zamora is recognized to sponsor the budget of the Department of Education.
Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, it is my honor to sponsor the budget of the Department of Education, including its attached agencies for the fiscal year 2024, amounting to 758.595 billion. The 758.595 billion obligation budget of the DepEd is broken down by agency as follows. Office of the Secretary Proper, 756.849 billion. Early Child Care Development Council, 221.166 million. National Academy of Sports, 196.941 million. National Book Development Board, 132.91 million. National Council for Children's Television, 63.91 million. National Museum of the Philippines, 1.32 billion, and Philippine High School for the Arts, 100.516 million. In terms of new appropriations, which is subject to congressional approval, the total proposed budget of the DepEd, including its attached agencies, amounts to 714.163 billion, representing an increase of about 5.28%, or 35.846 billion higher than the fiscal year 2023 level of 678.317 billion. The 756.849 billion proposed budget of the Department of Education, Office of the Secretary Proper, will be used to support the programs and activities aligned with the Matatag agenda that aims to address the basic education challenges of the country. Among the major programs of the department for fiscal year 2024 include the government assistance and subsidies with an allocation of 39.33 billion, operations for elementary and secondary schools with 37.66 billion, basic education facilities or the school building program with 33.76 billion, new school personnel positions with 26.20 billion, textbooks and other instructional materials with 12.04 billion, school-based feeding program with 11.71 billion, DepEd computerization program with 8.88 billion, general and management supervision with 8.88 billion, flexible learning options with 4.28 billion, basic education curriculum with 4 billion, learning tools and equipment with 3.95 billion, last mile schools program with 3 billion, quick response fund with 3 billion, human resource development for personnel in schools and learning centers with 2.43 billion, and disaster preparedness and response program with 2.16 billion. As mentioned by President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. in his State of the Nation address, nagsisimula ang lahat sa edukasyon. Ito ay para palakasin ang isip at kakayahan ng bawat Pilipino. He further highlighted that learning recovery will be at the forefront of the education agenda. In view of the foregoing, may I earnestly appeal to my esteemed colleagues of this august chamber to join me in supporting the proposed budget of the Department of Education. This budget will enable them to carry out their mandate, the best possible basic education for all our learners to become competent, job-ready, active, responsible, and patriotic citizens. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This representation is now ready to answer questions from our colleagues.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Gabriel H. Bordado Jr. of the 3rd District of Camarines Sur to interpret the sponsor on the proposed budget of the Department of Education.
The Honorable Bordado of the 3rd District of Camarines Sur is recognized to interpolate the sponsor.
Thank
Please
you,
proceed.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the completion rates for secondary education and higher degrees in the Philippines are significantly lower than desired. Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, what measures can the Department of Education implement to ensure equitable access to quality education throughout all levels of schooling?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the Department of Education has recently launched its Matatag agenda in order to provide accessible, equitable, and quality basic education. And several features of Matatag agenda is one is in making the curriculum relevant. Second, it's the taking of steps to accelerate delivery of basic education through its facilities and resources. Of course, another feature is taking good care of learners and giving support to teachers. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, Madam Sponsor. Mr. Speaker, the Philippines' performance in international assessments, like the Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA, has been consistently low. What strategies can be put in place to improve student performance in subjects like reading, science, and mathematics to bring the country's education system at par with global standards?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, as mentioned, that the Matatag curriculum has been launched, and as part of this curriculum, the National Learning Program has been adopted. The National Learning Recovery Program has 5 sub-programs. 1, National Learning Camp. 2nd, National Reading Program. 3rd, National Mathematics Program. 4th, National Science and Technology Program. And 5th, other similar programs implemented to support learning recovery efforts. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you again, Madam Sponsor. Mr. Speaker, the pandemic exacerbated existing educational challenges and led to a significant number of learners being left behind. Now, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, how can the government address the learning gaps that have widened due to the pandemic, particularly for disadvantaged students?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, recognizing these learning gaps, it is actually part of the programs that will be addressed by the sub-programs under the National Learning Recovery Program. As mentioned, the 5 sub-programs, as I mentioned earlier, I have enumerated the 5 sub-programs, and this aims to address the learning gaps mentioned by His Honor, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Sponsor. Mr. Speaker, teacher quality and support issues have been identified as major concerns, including an attractive teaching profession prospects and misalignment between teacher training and curriculum needs. Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, what policy changes can enhance teacher recruitment, training, and overall well-being to positively impact student learning outcomes.
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, to address this concern, part also, matatag curriculum is the teacher quality, improving the teacher quality. And there are several programs for teacher professional development that is being implemented by the department. And it includes the teachers induction program, the superintendent programs, the higher order thinking program, to name a few, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
According to the National Expenditure Program, Mr. Speaker, classroom teachers would be given 5,000 in cash allowances to augment expenses for teaching supplies and materials, for internet and communication expenses, and for annual medical examination. Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, will this cash allowance be given on a monthly basis or will it be on an annual basis?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, this will be given on an annual basis, Mr. Speaker. Once a year.
Once a year. Do you think, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, this is enough to address the problems and concerns of the teachers regarding teaching materials and other activities?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the department recognizes the concern of His Honor. In fact, several bills are already pending in Congress as to the proposal on how these can be improved in the future, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, is it possible to do it on a monthly basis?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, since this is being implemented through a Republic Act, then whatever improvement or recommendations that we see appropriate to improve this concern, it will be up to Congress to decide whether to consider the proposed bills being submitted to this chamber, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor, let it be on record that I fully support the move or the proposal to increase the salaries of teachers immediately, Mr. Speaker, Madam Sponsor. Mr. Speaker, the practice of mass promotion has resulted in students advancing without mastering fundamental skills, leading to poor learning outcomes. How can the government address this practice and ensure that students are adequately prepared for higher levels of education?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, there is no, as of this moment, there is no policy on mass promotion. To address this issue, DepEd provides support for teachers through the following. 1, conduct of collaborative expertise sessions. 2, use of assessment data. 3, monitoring learner progress for immediate and targeted intervention. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, Madam Sponsor. Mr. Speaker, the national assessment tests and localized assessments have faced criticism for failing to accurately measure learning outcomes? How can the assessment system be restructured to provide accurate data for curriculum improvement and to identify necessary interventions for struggling students?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the Department of Education, through the Bureau of Education Assessment, conducts the following activities. 1, analysis and utilization of assessment reports. 2, adoption of the National Learning Recovery Program. 3rd, creation of test primers for the NAT-like and PISA-like assessments. 4th, engagement with partners to boost its capacity to conduct large-scale assessments. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, Madam Sponsor. Mr. Speaker, prolonged lockdowns and lack of face-to-face classes have raised concerns about students and teachers' mental health. Now that classes are back to face-to-face, what steps can be taken to prioritize mental health support within the education system, and how can this support be effectively integrated into the curriculum?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the Department of Education recognizes these concerns on mental health, not just mental health problems amongst teachers, but with learners as well. And there are several programs being implemented by the Department of Education related to mental health. 1, the homeroom guidance curriculum. 2nd, there are 10,000 trained in psychological first aid activities. Then there is also Lusog Isip Kabataan Education online platform as partnered with the USAID. And there is also the Katatagan Teacher Training as partnered with Natasha Goldborn Foundation. And mental health screening tool plus assessment tool, DepEd DOH referral system, Barkada Contra Droga plus integration with adolescent health programs. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, Madam Sponsor. Mr. Speaker, the Citizens EdCom initiative highlights private sector involvement in education reform. How can the government effectively collaborate with private entities to bring about transformative change in the education sector? And what role can the private sector play in enhancing educational outcomes?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, there are several programs under the Department of Education that involves public and private partnership. To name a few, this includes GASPE, the voucher system, the Private Education Office, the Government Assistance Subsidies Office, and the NTWG Complementary Framework for Private and Public Schools. And this is in partnership with ADB, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Madam Sponsor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to Her Excellency, Madam Sara Duterte, the Secretary of Education and Vice President of the Republic of the Philippines. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, next to interpellate the sponsor, I move that we recognize Representative Raul Daniel Manuel of the Kabataan Party List.
Representative Manuel is recognized to interpolate the sponsor. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Maayong hapon sa tanan. Would the sponsor yield to some questions?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Magsimula muna tayo, Mr. Speaker, sa mga dapat na gawin ng DepEd in line with its mandate. Mr. Speaker, this is about face-to-face classes. Mr. Speaker, ang sabi po ng DepEd sa committee-level budget briefing, lahat daw ng mga basic education institutions ay nagkakonduct na ng full face-to-face class. Would DepEd through the sponsors still stand by that figure, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the Department of Education is, while some of the schools are adopting face-to-face learning, but the department also allows blended learning among schools if the situation calls for it, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Pero Mr. Speaker, ang status quo natin ano siya? Ibig sabihin, kung wala pa namang mga kalamidad o mga untoward incidents, then ang default na ba ngayon sa lahat ng mga basic education institutions ay full face-to-face po ang kinakonduct nila?
That is correct, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Ayun. Mr. Speaker, meron po tayong mga case studies showing na hindi po totoo na ang default sa mga basic education institutions ay full face-to-face. Mr. Speaker, halimbawa po, West Fairview Elementary School. Meron po silang blended classes kasi kulang ang classrooms. Marami pong mga estudyante per class, 50 to 60. Inulat po ng isang magulang na meron siyang anak sa West Fairview Elementary School. Mr. Speaker, ang pasok po doon Monday to Wednesday, face-to-face. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, Monday and Wednesday. So 2 araw lang pala, face-to-face. Pero Tuesday and Thursday, online. Friday, Mr. Speaker, alternate na online and face-to-face. Another, Mr. Speaker, sa Arellano University High School, hindi full face-to-face ang senior high school dahil salitan ang paggamit ng room. Meron pong room, nagro-rotate po doon ang 4 na klase, Mr. Speaker, across all strands. Sa kanilang junior high school, Monday to Tuesday, online, Wednesday to Friday, face-to-face. And pangatlo, Mr. Speaker, sa Jose Rizal University Senior High School, meron po silang subject, Mr. Speaker, face-to-face ng Monday and Tuesday, tapos online, Thursday and Friday. So, Mr. Speaker, these are actual experiences disproving the figure of DepEd na full face-to-face ang default sa lahat ng mga paaralan, Mr. Speaker. Ano po ang komento doon ng DepEd?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, as I earlier mentioned, that blended learning is allowed by the department depending on the situation of the school, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
So, Mr. Speaker, ang mga nabanggit nating case studies, hindi po sila nagbe-blended learning or nag-online class dahil merong bagyo o merong calamity, Mr. Speaker. Ito po ang araw-araw na sitwasyon sa kanila na hindi po full face-to-face. Kaya, Mr. Speaker, kung may confidential funds ang DepEd at marami pong sinusurveil na mga kung ano-ano, pero ang basic po na task ng DepEd sana ay alamin ang konkretong kalagayan sa ating mga basic education institutions. Malinaw, Mr. Speaker, na sa basic na pag-compile, pag-collect ng data, ay may pagkukulang po ang ahensya, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the department recognizes the need for construction of more classrooms, and that is a fact. And in fact, the department, through its proposal, is requesting for additional fund for the construction of a school building to address the congestion problems in schools, especially in the National Capital Region. And that is being addressed through this proposed funding, which up to Congress to approve this said request, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, sa atin po, we support yung pagtaas ng budget para sa mas marami mga classroom, Mr. Speaker. Sa totoo nga lang po, if we look at the figures sa budget ng education, totoo po, mataas. Pero, syempre, Mr. Speaker, kung kaya pang taasan, kasi nga ang infrastructure natin na 1.4 trillion pesos, Mr. Speaker, ang focus po nito ay mga big-ticket infrastructure. Kung pwede nga po, dapat yan mga classrooms. Significant ang share ng classrooms, ospital at iba pa, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, while gusto nating damihan ang classrooms, ang napansin po natin sa Department of Education, parang ginagawang excuse ang pagkakaroon ng blended learning. Ibig sabihin po parang, okay, cool ang classrooms ngayon, makontento na lang dun sa mababang budget for more classrooms dahil nandiyan naman ang blended learning. And Mr. Speaker, ito ang nangyayari sa maraming paaralan. Para hindi magsiksikan sa mga classroom, kaysa magpatayo ng dagdag na classroom, nag-online na lang sa ilang mga araw during the weekday. So Mr. Speaker, ano ba ang konkretong mga hakbang para mapabilis natin ang pagpaparami ng ating mga classroom?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, to say that kontento na lang ang Department of Education na hindi magtayo ng classroom is inaccurate. In fact, the Department of Education is consistent in its request for additional funding for the construction of building so as to address the congestion problems in our schools, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, ang na-observe po kasi natin, kahit sa mga paaralan, wherein hindi pa naman ganun kalakas ang internet connection, pinipilit po sila, Mr. Speaker, na mag-blended learning. Ibig sabihin po, dahil nga kulang ang classroom, pero wala din naman sila internet connection, pero ang default na lang na tugon, sige, mag-blended kayo. Mr. Speaker, this puts the burden upon schools. Kesa po tayo sa national government, ang mas magkaroon ng upper hand sana at saka initiative para hindi na lamang masanay ang ating mga paaralan na sila ang pinapag-suffer natin, Mr. Speaker, sa kakulangan ng pondo tsaka sa top level na policy na blended learning ang nagiging state policy natin ngayon on education. So ano pang comment ng ating sponsor?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the observation of His Honor in terms of congestion and the need for school building is accurate. And again, to emphasize, the Department of Education is consistent in its efforts to address the classroom shortage among our schools. And in fact, this proposal for 2024 budget is an indication that the department is committed to address these problems. Again, if the Congress, as having the power of the purse, recommends for more budget for the construction of building, then that would be very welcome, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, sa current po na budget ng DepEd, in how many years po natin mako-close yung gap sa classroom shortage, given ang pondo na meron ngayon ang DepEd?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, per record, the Department of Education is targeting for 20 years for the department to be able to complete the classroom shortage of the schools.
So 20 years, Mr. Speaker. At least may ganun pong figure ang DepEd, pero tingin natin, Mr. Speaker, sobrang tagal pa rin talaga nun, lalo na gusto nga natin ma-address ang learning poverty, Mr. Speaker. Tapos ngayon, milyon-milyon ang ating mga basic education students. Kaya din talaga, kung may pondo naman po for confidential funds across agencies, aside po sa pag-defend natin sa West Philippine Sea, isa din sana sa mga paglipatan ng confidential and intelligence funds, Mr. Speaker, ay ang ating mga classrooms because 20 years would really be too long, Mr. Speaker. Sa definition po, Mr. Speaker, ng DepEd for classroom or school congestion, Mr. Speaker, aside sa ratio ng pupils to classrooms, taken din po ba into consideration ang ratio ng pupils sa land area ng mga paaralan, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the department has a standard size for the classroom, and this is for 40 learners per classroom ratio, and not taking consideration the land area. But of course, in the construction of building, land size is also being considered. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, so from the standpoint of DepEd, pag sinabi po nating school congestion, ano po ang definition na ginagamit ng ahensya to classify schools na, okay, dito congested, dito hindi?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. As to the congestion of the classroom, the DepEd uses a classroom to student ratio for it to consider a classroom to be congested. This is based on the following criteria. For class size for kindergarten, the standard is 25 learners, maximum of a class of 30. Tama? It's 25 to a maximum of 30. For grade 1 to 2, it's 30 in a class, maximum of 35. For grade 3, it's 30 in a class, maximum of 35. For grade 4 and junior high school, it's 40 in a class, maximum of 45. And senior high school, 40 learners in a class. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to land information or land area naman, no? Impormasyon on the land area of our schools, Mr. Speaker. Kasi bahagi din to ng accounting natin, ano na ang land area ng mga schools, possible ba magtayo ng mga bagong building or dagdagan ng floors. Mr. Speaker, ano ang sistema ng DepEd for collecting land area information?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, actually there is no basis in identifying the land. It actually depends on the available land in the locality, like in terms of donated lands or lands that are being utilized by DepEd through use of RAC or other government facilities that are authorized for DepEd to utilize, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
So, ibig sabihin, Mr. Speaker, kung wala pong ganong sistema, hindi din natin na-factor in ang land area para mas maging realistic po ang ating mga targets to address school congestion.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, as of this moment, the Department of Education is doing its collection, is collecting data through mapping. And this is being conducted as we speak, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, next topic po tungkol naman sa comprehensive sexuality education kasi bahagi ng mga dapat na gawin ng DepEd under the RH law ay tiyakin na dapat nasa curriculum ang comprehensive sexuality education. Mr. Speaker, merong inilaan for this year, 2023, na 777 million pesos, special provision for the training of implementers of sexuality education. Ano na po ang status ng paggamit ng pondo na ito?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the mentioned amount for the CSE or Comprehensive Sexuality Education is being utilized for curriculum for in-service training for teachers and for curriculum development. And in terms of operations, a portion of the fund was used for integrated services for adolescent health and for specific support services like teen centers, iron supplement, menstrual hygiene, and the like. And there is also a utilization for integrated learner support service as part of the CSE program, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, so far ngayong 2023, out of the 777 million, magkano na po ang nagastos ng DepEd para ma-implement ang mga nabanggit ng ating sponsor?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, I cannot give exact figure as of this moment because this school year has just started and these programs is continuing, but of course, this has to be rolled out. We have started the school year, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
So Mr. Speaker, ano po ang status ng implementation nito? And also, Mr. Speaker, ang pagtuturo rin talaga na bahagi ng curriculum ang comprehensive sexuality education. Ano po ang status nito ngayon?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the programs that I have mentioned earlier, in the programs that I have mentioned earlier, the curriculum development and the training of teachers has already been conducted, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, ilang mga paaralan na sa bansa ang merong teachers na na-train na for eventually being able to teach comprehensive sexuality education?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, all teachers are being trained because this is all schools are trained because of, it's part of INSET, in-service training, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
So Mr. Speaker, ibig sabihin po, confident tayo na kung pupunta po ako sa any random basic education institution, sigurado po ako, Mr. Speaker, na meron silang teachers na na-train na to teach comprehensive sexuality education.
That is correct, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, meron na po bang costed implementation plan para sa comprehensive sexuality education?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, Yes, there is already a plan, and to break down, 66 million is intended for in-service training for teachers, and 10 million for curriculum development, and 125 million for integrated service for adolescent health, 3 million for ARH-specific support services, and 100 million special provision for ARH. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, can we request from the sponsor na mabigyan po tayo ng written na submission nung lahat po ng mga nabanggit regarding comprehensive sexuality education?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we will comply.
Mr. Speaker, when can we expect to receive those submissions?
Tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kasunod po, Mr. Speaker, ito ay mga mas controversial na po na mga topics, Mr. Speaker. Ang nabanggit po ng DepEd Secretary regarding dropouts. Mr. Speaker, nabanggit po ng DepEd Secretary na dahilan daw ang mga rally kaya maraming mga nagda-drop out sa basic education. Can the department still stand by that position?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the Secretary of the Department of Education denies that there is a statement mentioned na maraming nada-drop out dahil sa rally. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, pwede po nating i-quote ang DepEd Secretary. Mr. Speaker, ito din ay nasa iba't ibang media outlets, Mr. Speaker, nung sinabi ng DepEd Secretary na ang mga rally daw ay siyang dahilan bakit may mga dropouts. And Mr. Speaker, nung tinatanong ang DepEd Secretary, ano ang tugon dun sa issue ng maraming mga nagda-drop out na mga kabataan, kesa po magbigay ng mga hakbang sana ano ang gagawin ng DepEd regarding that, ang naging sagot po, dineflect ang usapin, Mr. Speaker.
Mr.
ano pang
Speaker,
comment?
Your Honor, there was no statement from the Secretary of the Department.
Mr. Speaker, parang kagaya din po kasi ito ng tugon sa atin ng Chair ng National Youth Commission na nakuquote po sila at mismo mga matagal na ring media outlets, Mr. Speaker, ang nagsasabi. Pero kapag po kailangan natin silang pagpaliwanagin regarding their statements, dinedenay na po ang kanilang mga statement, Mr. Speaker. So ano pong comment ng ating sponsor?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, in fact, the Secretary of the Department, the Vice President, has issued a statement requesting for media outlets to correct their reports so as not to misinform the public. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Sige, Mr. Speaker, tingin natin ang mga media outlets naman ginagawa ang kanilang trabaho para mas malaman din ng ating mga kababayan ano ang positions, ano ang pronouncements ng ating mga public officials. So kung hindi din naman pala mga rally ang dahilan ng dropouts, ibig sabihin, Mr. Speaker, babalik din yun sa atin sa pamahalaan. Ano ba talaga ang mga konkretong hakbang natin regarding dropping out of our students? So Mr. Speaker, edi kung babalik tayo dun sa issue, ano na po ang mga ginagawa ng DepEd para hindi na dumami ang mga nagda-drop out na mga kabataan?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the department is implementing the non-formal school alternative learning system so as to accommodate those young people, out of school youth, for them to be able to avail of the education service of the country, of the government, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, ano ang mga dahilan bakit marami ang dropouts sa basic education?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, based on the study conducted by the Department of Education, they identified several causes for dropout. One is the economic and for economic and livelihood reason. Second, lack of interest among young people. Third, migration of families because of employment. And with that, the department is implementing child-friendly policies so as to encourage our out-of-school youth to go back to school. And there are also programs for learners at risk being implemented for these possible dropouts, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
So malinaw, Mr. Speaker, na hindi po kasama ang mga rally sa dahilan kung bakit may mga estudyante tayo na nagda-drop out, Mr. Speaker. Now, ilan na po sa ngayon ang bilang ng dropouts? Kasi at first, Mr. Speaker, reported na 2 million yung hindi pa nakakapag-enroll as of the enrollment period for school year 2023-2024. So ngayon po, Mr. Speaker, at this time, kung may mga nakahabol na nag-enroll, edi ilan na po ang ating official na bilang ng mga nag-drop out?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, for this school year, we do not have a figure yet. But for school year 2022 to 2023, records of
Mr.
the
Speaker,
department...
allow me to butt in. Kasi ang question ko pa, Mr. Speaker, ay for the upcoming school year. Kung meron po tayong budget for surveillance sa ibang mga bagay, Mr. Speaker, ito po basic information na dapat ready po ang DepEd na sagutin.
Mr. Speaker, the encoding of the figures is still ongoing, and that is why the department could not provide the figure for this school year. But for 2022 and 2023, we can provide now the figure, and it's 349,788 dropouts for public school. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Yun lang po, Mr. Speaker, medyo nakaka-disappoint po na hindi ready ang DepEd na ibigay ang ganong figure. Pwede naman po, Mr. Speaker, while ongoing ang pag-collect ng data, edi na-update natin regularly ang ating figures with the use of electronics at iba pang mga pamamaraan para mapabilis po yan, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, regarding the memo na ginawa na pong diktadura, ang phrase na diktadurang Marcos. Mr. Speaker, hindi po ba ito magiging ambag sa state-sponsored disinformation? Dahil po factual naman and internationally recognized ang fact na diktador po si Ferdinand Marcos Sr.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the reason behind the removal of Marcos in the terminology diktadurang Marcos is because of the main consideration on the to be able to be consistent in the framing of that portion of the new Araling Panlipunan curriculum, which is focused on historical themes and concepts and not each presidential term. Historical themes and the analysis of these may be in the context of one or more presidential themes. The following phrases are now used: pagpapatupad ng diktadura, epekto ng diktadura, o paglaban sa diktadura. Any discussion on dictatorship in the Philippines in the 1970s will inevitably point to a discussion on the administration of former President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, sa panahon po na meron talagang mga systematic attempts to make the people forget what happened in the past, Mr. Speaker, dapat nga nakapanguna tayo eh. Lalo pa nating pagbutihin, di ba? Yung paano natin na ituturo ang ganung mga topics. So kaysa mag-step back po tayo, Mr. Speaker, dapat nga umabante pa tayo. And again, Mr. Speaker, wala namang diktadura kung wala pong diktador. So sino po yon ang tinutukoy ng diktadura, Mr. Speaker? Kaya mainam talaga mapangalanan yon. Lalo, Mr. Speaker, kung ang PCO hindi siya proactive sa pag-counter ng fake news. Tapos, Mr. Speaker, ang AFP pa sasabihin nakatulong sa ekonomiya ang martial law. Tapos, Mr. Speaker, ang DepEd din nagsi-step back sa pagtuturo nun. So ano na lang ang kahinatnan ng ating mga kabataan who would forget and not learn from history? So yun lang, Mr. Speaker, sana makonsider pa rin yun ng DepEd kasi hindi po tayo sang-ayon sa ganong memorandum, Mr. Speaker. Now,
Sir Speaker, that is the opinion of His Honor, and he is entitled to his opinion.
The Honorable Manuel has 2 more minutes.
yeah, Mr. Speaker, ito po tungkol sa ito na, confidential fund. Mr. Speaker, sa education community, nandyan ang SUCs, nandyan din ang CHED. Mr. Speaker, sila nga hindi nagre-request ng confidential fund. What makes DepEd special para bigyan siya ng confidential fund?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the department, on the question of why DepEd need confidential fund, the department is mandated to provide accessible, equitable, and quality basic education, which necessarily includes the provision of a safe and enabling learning environment. Education and national security are inevitably intertwined. Today, our schools are confronted by several threats on recruitment to terrorist and violent extremist groups, drug trade, sexual abuse, child pornography, as well as organized criminal activities and scams against our learners, teachers, and non-teaching personnel. Confidential funds are necessary in gathering intelligence for the formulation and implementation of target programs, activities, and projects to combat threats to security in our
Okay,
schools
Mr. Speaker, since
and
konti
for
na lang po
our
yung time ko,
personnel.
since I think online available na rin naman po yan. Mr. Speaker, pwede din kasi yung gamiting justification ng SUCs natin tsaka CHED. Pero Mr. Speaker, they never use those arguments para manghingi po sila ng confidential fund. And Mr. Speaker, sinabi din in defense of the confidential fund of DepEd, sabi po ng dating AFP Chief of Staff, Esperon, sabi po niya, dapat lang na may confidential fund ang DepEd para daw matiyak ang loyalty ng mga tao sa gobyerno, matiyak na hindi sila espiya. Tapos Mr. Speaker, ang sabi pa, hindi dapat kino-question ng Kamara ang confidential fund ng DepEd. So Mr. Speaker, to wrap up na lang, Mr. Speaker, hindi po katanggap-tanggap na uutusan po tayo, Mr. Speaker, sa Kamara, ano yung pwede nating gawin at ano yung hindi natin pwedeng gawin. Kasi trabaho po natin ito, Mr. Speaker, mag-scrutinize. So kung ganito ang mga arguments in defense of the confidential fund of DepEd, dapat na lang din talaga, wala po itong confidential fund. Yun na lang, Mr. Speaker. Salamat.
Thank you. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the next to interpellate is the Honorable Arlene Brosas of Gabriela Party List. I now move that we recognize Honorable Brosas.
The Honorable Brosas of the party list, Gabriela, is recognized to interpellate the sponsor. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may compliance po ba sa transparency seal? Mr. Speaker, will the good sponsor yield to a few questions, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, may transparency seal ba? May compliance po ba sa transparency seal ang DepEd?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Kasi, Mr. Speaker, yung transparency seal, Mr. Speaker, ito yung section 98, no, ng both special provisions and general provisions ng 2024 GAB, Mr. Speaker, na dapat yung lahat, no, isa publiko ng mga ahensya ang ilang mahahalagang mga datos ukol sa mga opisyal, budget at programa, proyekto nila. Tapos particularly sa DepEd, Mr. Speaker, may special provision sa budget mandating the posting of certain details, no, accomplishments, etc. Mr. Speaker, yung SP15, posting of all newly created and unfilled teaching positions, names of newly appointed teachers within the current year. SP17, filling up of vacant positions, the DepEd shall take all appropriate measures to fill up its existing vacant teaching and non-teaching positions.
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the department is compliant, and in fact, these information are being posted in the website.
Mr. Speaker, bakit nakakuha po tayo ng pagtingin online, nakakita po tayo online, wala pong transparency page. Hindi pa updated yung mga dokumento at datos na meron, Mr. Speaker. Tapos, ang mapapansin na ang last date ng mga dokumento ay 2019 pa at yung iba may error 403 pa. So we note the zero compliance of the DepEd to the entire general provision on transparency as well as its special provision under its 2022 and 2023 budget, such as the mandate to post data on the hiring of new teachers and the implementation of the e-GASPE funds, Mr. Speaker. Kahit po si Secretary Liling Briones dati have complied with these transparency provisions, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, as we check now the website of the department, there is a transparency page, Mr. Speaker.
So may transparency page. So nandun po yung lahat ng ito, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, that is reflected on the transparency page, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
So, Mr. Speaker, kailangan po talagang laging on hand yung mga dokumento. Kasi kahit po yung DPWH may updated and substantial compliance dito, Mr. Speaker. Mahalaga po ito, marka po ito ng mabuting pamamalakad, wastong paggamit sa pera at buwis ng mamamayan. Respeto rin po ito sa karapatan ng mamamayan, taong bayan sa impormasyon at access sa pampublikong mga dokumento, record at datos. Mahalaga ito para sa mga researchers, mga akademiko, mga taga-media, at kahit po mga sinong citizen na interesado sa good governance and public transparency, lalo na po sa usapin ng pondo. So, Mr. Speaker, kasi nanghihingi po kami ng data ng Filipino Deaf Community sa implementasyon ng DepEd sa FSL Act. Dahil bulk of the efforts on making the mandates a reality galing sa private sector groups of the Filipino Deaf Community, marami silang sinisingil like ilan ang targets at actual accomplishments sa hiring ng deaf teachers, teachers who know FSL and FSL interpreters, ilan ang targets at actual accomplishments sa production ng IMs, nasaan po yung annual reports. Baka po meron kayo dyan since hindi namin ma-access yung inyong
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the report reflects the lump report for special needs education. But if Her Honor would like to request a copy of the details of this report, then the department will be very glad to comply.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, please submit po yung reports na yan on FSL, Mr. Speaker. So, you're sure na merong transparency seal and you're abiding by Section 98, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, yung next question ko po ay on inclusive education. Magkano po ang sinabmit ng DepEd sa DBCC for the program support budget or yung PSB?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the department proposed for... Mr. Speaker, may I ask for a few-minute recess just to check the accuracy of our data?
Session suspended.
Oh, this is, sorry. Mr. Speaker.
Session is resumed.
Per record, Mr. Speaker, the department requested for fiscal year 2024, a budget proposal of 6,024,330,000 for inclusive education program.
Mr. Speaker, saan po siya nakalagay? 6 billion? No?
6,024,330. That is the proposal for the 2024 budget, and it is also being reflected in the NEP 2024.
In the NEP. Sa GAB po, so same naman siya, no? So saan ko po siya makikita? Under
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, wala pa po tayong GAB for 2024. So what I mentioned is the request of the department for proposal for 2024, and that is 6,024,330,000. And that is also being provided by the Department of Budget and Management through the NEP.
So, Mr. Speaker, under saan siya? Nasa special needs education program ba siya na item? New personal positions ba siya? Basic education facilities ba siya na item, Mr. Speaker?
Regular program. Under regular. Sir Speaker, Your Honor, this is under inclusive education program. And if I may be allowed to enumerate the sub-programs under inclusive education program, this includes multi-grade education, indigenous peoples education program, flexible learning options, madrasa education program, special needs education program, and alternative learning systems program.
Mr. Speaker, may breakdown ba kayo nito? How much did you propose and how much ang pinasok ng DBCC na nasa GAB ngayon? Ilan
Mr.
yung target
Speaker,
accomplishments ninyo?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the 6,024,330,000 that I mentioned earlier is being broken down into the following. Under multi-grade, these are the proposal, no, for 2024 by the Department of Education. And multi-grade education proposal is 161,512,000. Indigenous Peoples Education Program is 154,436,000. Flexible learning options amounting to 3,645,035,000. Madrasa Education Program amounting to 431,639,000. Special Needs Education Program amounting to 999,225,000. And Alternative Learning System, or ALS, amounting to 632,483,000. A total of 6,024,330,000, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we have a copy of what you're reading, Mr. Speaker? And Mr. Speaker, yung PSB for Republic Act 11650 or the Inclusive Education Act, Section 30 says, no, to ensure PSB, to ensure the institutionalization of services for learners with disabilities, a PSB for learners with disabilities shall be included as a line item in the general appropriations of the DepEd to guarantee the implementation of the provisions of this act, no? Including the following: implementation of the child find system, hiring of specialists for the diagnosis and assessment of learners with disabilities, and the prescription of appropriate intervention. To defray expenses in the delivery of related services as stated in Section 4, subparagraph P of this Act, such as transportation and various developmental, corrective, and other support services. And lastly, purchase of assistive devices, equipment, learning materials, and other needed resources to deliver services effectively. So, yung PSB for learners with disabilities shall be used solely for the delivery of services for learners with disabilities and for the performance of the functions of the ILRCs and the IACC. Mr. Speaker, hindi po natin narinig yung line item ng mga ito doon sa sinabi ninyo, Mr. Speaker. Paano ba yun?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, these programs that mentioned earlier by Your Honor are part and included in the special needs education program.
Mr. Speaker, is this really the PSB na mandated line item? Kasi yun po yung nakalagay doon sa batas. Line item per RA 11650, no, Mr. Speaker? Halimbawa, Mr. Speaker, yung 999.225 million, ang Special Needs Education Program sa 2024, lahat yun MOOE, Mr. Speaker. How can that be for hiring or specialists and for outlay of equipment and facilities, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the Special Needs Education Program is already part of the line item which encompasses the other programs earlier mentioned, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, services for learners disability, a PSB for learners with disability shall be included as a line item in the General Appropriations Act. So kaya tinatanong po natin kanina Mr. Speaker, so walang line item ito, yung PSB. It is under the Special Needs Education Program.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, that is correct. The programs earlier mentioned are all part of Special Needs Education Program.
So parang sinasabi nyo doon papasok yung lahat ng yon.
That is correct, Mr. Speaker.
For learners with disabilities, pero walang specific for learners with disabilities.
That Special Needs Education Program includes the special learners, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, parang nakapaloob ba siya doon sa
Special Needs
sa
Education.
special needs? So, how can that be for hiring or specialists? Kasi tinanong ko rin yung mga breakdown nito, di ba? Sa MOOE kasi nakalagay Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, in terms of hiring of teachers for this specialized program, there is an allocation for the hiring of these teachers. It's not just reflected under Special Needs Education Program, but it is reflected under, it is included under the PS, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
So it's not reflected dun sa Special Needs Education Program kasi MOOE yung nakalagay doon, di ba, Mr. Speaker? Pero may PS siya. So nasaan po sa item ng PS yon, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the hiring of teachers for special learning is reflected not under the Special Needs Education Program. It is reflected under the PS. However, the Special Needs Education Program has components on MOE and capital outlay. Under the basic education facilities, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Under the basic education facilities, ito pa yung 209 million for the conversion of SPED centers into ILRCs.
That is correct, Mr. Speaker.
May breakdown po ba kayo nito? Magkano yung pinropose?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, we will provide, Her Honor, a breakdown.
Pati
of,
yung target accomplishments, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, there's a total 16 SNEDILRCs targeted for 2024, and 209 million is being proposed to accomplish this target, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
So, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pwede kong makuha yung mga details, Mr. Speaker.
We will provide, Mr. Speaker.
So, is it readily available now, Mr. Speaker?
We will, the department will submit by tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last August 2023, nilaunch ang Matatag Curriculum. Tama ba?
That is correct, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Full na po ba ang launch nito? Buong K-10 ba ang affected?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, when the Matatag Curriculum was launched, it aims to produce learners with foundational skills in literacy and numeracy with 21st century skills, nationalistic and global and successful in life. The implementation is by phase. For phase 1, for 2024 to 2025, it's intended for kindergarten, grade 1, grade 4, and grade 7. For phase 2, for 2025 and 2026, it's intended for grade 2, grade 5, and grade 8. For phase 3, for 2026 to 2027, it's for grade 3, grade 6, and grade 9. And for phase 4, 2028 to 2029, the department expects for its full implementation. Mr.
So, Mr. Speaker, parang nagsisimula pa lang ngayon, pilot pa lang.
That is correct, Mr. Speaker.
So, Mr. Speaker, ano-ano yung mga schools na pinili nyo upang i-test ang Matatag Curriculum?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, there are 35 schools identified as pilot schools, namely Calafog Elementary School in Apayao, Rizal Elementary School in Baguio City, Doña Aurora National High School in Baguio City, Lamayan Integrated School in Benguet, Bineng National High School in Benguet, Dampalit Integrated School in Malabon City, Santiago Sihuco Memorial School in Malabon City, Muzon Elementary School in Malabon City, Tinajeros National High School in Malabon City, Santiago Sihuco Memorial School in Santiago Sihuco Memorial Integrated School in Malabon City, Cabaruan Integrated School in La Union, Caba Central Elementary School in La Union, Acao Elementary School in La Union, Casa Cristo National High School in La Union, Don Rufino Olarte National High School in La Union, Kawayan North Central School in Kawayan City, Dingading Integrated School in Isabela, Villa Teresita Primary School in Isabela, Lana National High School, Isabela, General Emilio Aguinaldo National High School, Isabela, Tindog Integrated School, Cebu, San Fernando North Central Elementary School, Cebu, Tabogon Central Elementary School, Cebu, Dumanhog National High School in Cebu, Bantayan Science High School in Cebu, Mlang Pilot Elementary School in North Cotabato, Lamlifi Integrated School in Sarangani, Alegria Central Elementary School in Sarangani, San Vicente National High School in Sarangani, Alegria National High School in Sarangani, Baubawan Integrated School of Butuan, Suyangan Elementary School of Surigao
Mr.
del
Speaker,
Norte.
mahaba pa po ba yan?
We have 35. Three
35,
more
okay.
schools.
Mr. Speaker,
Santiago Central Elementary
pwedeng
School,
isubmit na lang,
Socor
Mr.
National
Speaker.
High School, and Pedro Duncano National High School. Mr.
okay.
Speaker.
Yan na yung last. Mr. Speaker, ano yung naging basis ng pagpili ng mga schools na ito, Mr. Speaker? Yung magsisimulang gumamit nitong matatag curriculum. Why these schools? Yan.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, random sampling has been made to ensure that diverse representation of schools is observed. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, sa pagpili ng mga paaralan, kasama ba yung mga deaf learners na kinonsidera nyo sa pagpilot ng test ng bagong curriculum na ito?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, no specific criteria for deaf learners. It's just selected through random sampling, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Random? So, Mr. Speaker, under Republic Act number 11106 or the Filipino Sign Language Act, required na ituro ang Filipino Sign Language as a separate subject. Sa matatag curriculum, sa grade 1 lang tinuturo ang language. Kasama po ba rito ang Filipino Sign Language, FSL? And considering na very specialized ang FSL, hindi po ba bitin kapag ka grade 1 lang ito itinuturo, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the FSL is part of the curriculum. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Yes, part of the curriculum sinabi ninyo, pero grade 1 lang, Mr. Speaker. Yan yung tanong ko. Mr. Speaker, do you need a suspension? Yung time ko kasi.
Mr. Speaker, yes, in the implementation, as I earlier mentioned, the implementation of the matatag curriculum is by phase, which is for phase 1, for this school year, our target is only for kindergarten, grade 1, grade 4, and grade 7. And yes,
tinatanong ko, Mr.
FSL
Speaker,
is being part.
Yung pagtanggal sa L1, sa first language, sa curriculum, grade 1 lang. Can you confirm?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, are you asking for the sign language or the mother tongue?
FSL.
FSL. FSL.
Sign language, sorry, sign language.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, FSL is included in the curriculum because this is included in the mainstream curriculum for the learners.
Mr. Speaker, ang Filipino Sign Language as the national sign language ay FSL, di ba? Meron po tayong batas na nagmamandato nito, no, Mr. Speaker. Lalo na sa education, yung referred to is hereby declared as the national sign language of the Philippines. The FSL shall be recognized, promoted, and supported as the medium of official communication in all transactions involving the deaf and as the language of instruction of deaf education without the prejudice to the use of other forms of communication depending on individual choice or preference. Section 4 po, medium of instruction and curriculum, the Department of Education, DepEd, TESDA, and all other national local government agencies involved in the education of the deaf are tasked to henceforth use and coordinate with each other on the use of FSL as the medium of instruction in deaf education. So yung FSL shall also be taught as a separate subject in the curriculum for deaf learners, the reading and writing of Filipino as the national language. So other Philippine languages and English shall also be taught to deaf learners. So dapat meron, Mr. Speaker.
Sir Speaker, may I request for a few minutes suspension just to get the data?
Session suspended.
Okay. Mr. Speaker.
Session is resumed.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, in addressing our deaf learners because of the inclusivity of our education system, these deaf learners are included in the mainstream class. And in the event, in cases where classes have learners, deaf learners, the teachers are trained for sign language, and therefore it's part of the mainstream teaching of our teachers, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Mr. Speaker, under the matatag curriculum, kasi may language kayo na subject, no? Ibig sabihin ba nito local language? Kung saan tinuturo? Kung saan nasan yung school, parang ganon. Tapos, ano yung naging basihan nyo? Bakit grade 1 lang itinuturo? Nagkaroon ba ng malawakang konsultasyon tungkol dito, Mr. Speaker?
With the permission of our colleagues on the floor, the chair would like to remind Representative
Yes,
Rosas
Mr. Speaker. Ang ginawa
that she
kasi
has
ng...
three more
Mr.
minutes left.
Yes, Mr.
Thank you.
Speaker. Ang ginawa kasi ng DepEd, sa matatag curriculum, yung mother tongue subject has been removed. Tama? Replace the generic language subject that is only in grade 1. Tapos yung MT as medium of instruction up to grade 3, after which English na. Yung pagtanggal po sa L1, first language sa curriculum in general, violation po ito ng human rights. Every child has a right to learn and use his or her language. United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, study of the Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues. Yan po, violation of due process dahil ang desisyon ay hindi made democratically. There were minimal, if any, specific studies, calls for proposals, designs, workshops, or consultations about alternative language policy options. So wala pong substantial coordination, consultation with the agencies having mandate over languages such as yung KWF, yung Komisyon ng Wikang Filipino, saka NCCA, no? Wala pong batayan and therefore taliwas sa siyensya at education philosophy. Yung pagtanggal sa L1 sa curriculum language 1, focus sa Filipino Sign Language, sa basics pa lang lumalabas, mali po itong pag-unawa ng mga gumawa, no, ng FSL. Para sa isang batang may kapansanan sa pandinig, ang FSL ay ang kanyang L1. Language niya po ito di ba? Ito yung natural language niya. Yung pinakauna niyang natutunan sa bahay at komunidad at yung pinakamayor niyang gamit sa araw-araw na komunikasyon. So, FSL ay isang visual language. Hindi po ito oral, hindi sound-based, hindi oral o nasasalita na bibigkas. May sariling vocabulary, rules on grammar, construction, ang FSL. Kapag ang pinangtuturo at tinuturo sa isang batang deaf ay oral at oral language, gaya ng Filipino ay English, which are based on sound and are spoken, you're forcing them to learn something which is unnatural to them. This gives them more burdens before they understand their lessons and higher barriers to education. This leads to discrimination. So, yung curriculum guides the design of the languages curricula, the language learning area, gives emphasis to the development of oral language skills. Ito po yung part 1 ng grade 1. For communication in the learner's first language. Paano nga po kung visual at hindi oral ang L1 nung bata? You'll effectively be forcing the deaf child during the first part of grade 1 to speak, to develop oral language skills. This unduly burdens him or her, in fact, forcing them to hurdle impossible barriers, lalo na kung yung bata ay pre-lingual deaf, yung nabingi or nabawasan, nasira ang hearing at birth or any time before the child could acquire speech.
Honorable Brosas, please wrap up.
Yes,
You have
Mr.
30
Speaker.
seconds left.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, meron tayong RA 11106, pero effectively pinapatay nila ang FSL and therefore committing a massive violation of the human rights of the Filipino deaf children and the Filipino deaf community. Mga dapat pong ginawa sana, tinanggal, sa halip na tanggalin yung L1, learning and teaching in L1, i-improve, not remove. So, yun, Mr. Speaker, sufficiently fund the requirements for the L1, Language 1 implementation, such as teachers and learning materials. Maraming salamat,
Mr. Speaker, to say that the department is pinapatay yung FSL is inaccurate because FSL is part of the mainstream teaching of the Department of Education. And for the record, it's only the subject on mother tongue that has been deleted in the matatag curriculum. But the use of local language as a medium of instruction stays, and it is still adherent to the human rights, the human rights provision for our learners, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, mahalaga po ang L1 sa atin.
Majority
We have
Leader.
130 to 195 languages, Mr. Speaker.
Session
At
suspended.
hindi dapat ito makalimutan, Mr. Speaker.
Session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, next on the list of interpellators, I move that we recognize Representative Franz L. Castro of the ACT Teachers Party List.
The Honorable Castro is recognized to interpolate the sponsor. Please proceed.
Okay. Again, Mr. Speaker, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat at sa pamilya ng DepEd na narito ngayon. So, but before I proceed to my interpellation, Mr. Speaker, gusto ko lang magkaroon ng manifestation dahil tayo po dito sa Kongreso, pagdating ng budget season, pinag-aaralan natin at binubusisi ang mga proposal ng iba't ibang mga ahensya at pinag-aaralan natin ano man yung mga issues and concerns ng ating mga taong bayan na dapat na ina-address. At yun po yung ginagawa ng ating mga kongresista na narito ngayon. At kami din sa Makabayan, talaga pong binubusisi natin. At eto nga po, 2 linggo na, 1 buwan, mahigit na tayo ay nagbubusisi ng budget ng ating para sa 2024. Kaya kung meron man tayong inire-raise na question on the policy, question doon sa paggamit ng pondo ng mamamayan, ay dapat sagutin ito ng wasto, sagutin ito ng tama, sagutin ito ng hanggang sa kaya ng mga ahensya. Okay? Ngayon lang kasi ako naka-experience, Mr. Speaker, noong ni-raise natin itong confidential fund, ay sa halip na sagutin ng Vice President at Secretary ng DepEd, itong mga issues natin sa confidential fund at ilang pong mga issues din na nire-raise natin sa education ay mga personal attack ang naranasan ko mula doon sa Office of the Vice President at saka sa DepEd. So ang gusto ko lang sabihin, Mr. Speaker, sana naman ay hindi ganun din ang values ng opisina ng OVP at ng Department of Education. Dahil ito ay, Mr. Speaker, ito po ay trabaho lang. Okay? Wala pong pikunan. Trabaho lang to. Mas grabe pa nga yung nangyayari dun sa ibang mga ahensya, no? Pero they take it as a healthy exercise. Itong nangyayari dito sa Kongreso. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, tayo po dito sa Kongreso, 315 tayo. Iba-iba yung ating mga paniniwala. Political belief, religious belief, paniniwala po doon sa mga paniniwala po doon sa mga batas o bills na ipinapasa natin. Pero at the end of the day, we are colleagues. At the end of the day, nirirespeto natin ang isa't isa. Hindi kami nagpepersonalan, hindi kami tumitira ng umaatake ng personal. So yun lang po, Mr. Speaker. So may I go on to my interpellation, Mr. Speaker. Last August 18, Mr. Speaker, nagbigay po tayo ng sulat. Ang aking pong office ay nagbigay ng sulat noong August 18, addressed to the Department Secretary, Yung mga inihingi po nating mga request, documents, bearing the status and releases, allotments, obligation, disbursements, and balances of the following items. Meron po akong in-identify, Mr. Speaker, na 27 na mga items dito. And secondly, yung hinihingi nating request of copies of the new K-10 curriculum o yung matatag curriculum. At saka yung update doon sa grade 11 and 12. Pero unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, hanggang ngayon, hindi pa ito kino-comply ng Department of Education, Mr. Speaker. Kasi kung hindi ito i-comply ngayon, so hindi tayo pwedeng pumayag na aprubahan ang budget ng Department of Education kasi itong kasimple na na simpleng communication ay hindi sinasagot more than a month na, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, for record, the department has complied in the submission of the following data and information. 1, the guidelines on the payment of overtime pay. 2, data on the payment of PBB, status of released PBB 2021. Third, status of releases,
Speaker,
allotments,
hindi po yan yung
obligation,
tinutukoy ko.
and final copy of the revised K-12 curriculum.
Ang tinutukoy ko po ay yung August 18, 2023 na budget. August 18, 2023 na letter. Ang nakalagay po dito ay right to request documents bearing, sinabi ko na kanina, sayang ang oras. Number 1, physical fitness and school sports, education, information, and communication services, legal services and development of education related to laws and rules. Number 4, child protection program. Number 5, disaster. So sayang po ang oras ko no pag kung sasabihin ko pa lahat. So may I ask Mr. Speaker for a minute suspension so that we can confer with the distinguished sponsor.
Session suspended.
Mr. Speaker, I have here a copy of the items requested by Her Honor through her letter dated August 18. And the department respectfully requests for time until Friday to extract the data being requested by Her Honor. And then we will submit.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, ako po ay nagtitiwala dito sa ating colleague na si Congressman Maricar Zamora na i-comply ng DepEd on Friday yung ating mga kahilingan. Okay?
That is a commitment, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you, Congressman Zamora. So on budget cuts, Mr. Speaker, alam niyo po yung binabudget natin sa education ay kulang pa yan kung pagbabatayan natin yung United Nations standard, no? At least 6% po ng GDP ang dapat na ibigay doon sa education. At nakikita natin yung mga budget cuts tuloy. Alam ko, nag-request ang Department of Education ng more than 900 billion for the department alone. Tama po ba? More than 100. More than 900 billion.
It's 954,348,965,000 to be exact, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. At nakikita natin dito, no, kung ito-total natin, Mr. Speaker, yung items na may cuts, aabot sa 15,664,364,000, more or less. Kaya kahit na tumaas ang, kahit na tumaas ang neto o yung net ng budget ng Department of Education mula sa 2023 GAA, ay makikitang hindi pa rin maganda yung sasapitin ng mga implementation ng projects and activities ng DepEd for 2024. Isa sa napansin ko, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, ay yung computerization program. Noong 2023, meron siyang 11.3 billion. In 2024, 8.9 billion with a variance of 21.64% or negative 2 billion. So, am I correct, distinguished sponsor?
That is correct, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you po. May siya, no? May kulang siya na 2 billion. So by the way, with this budget po, so ano po yung plano ng DepEd dito? So meron ba dito na laptop or computer distribution to our teachers, schools, and students? Kabilang po ba yan doon sa plano ng computerization program?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, for 2024, the department has a target of total 103,361 laptops. 34,500 of these will be for teachers, 4,001 for non-teaching, and 64,860 for classroom for students.
Okay. So can I have a copy of that, Mr. Speaker? Kasi wala naman dito sa...
Yes, we will
Thank you po.
furnish a copy.
So hopefully lang, Mr. Speaker, meron na namang bibilhing laptop, meron na namang bibilhing mga equipments. Hopefully lang, Mr. Speaker, hindi na mangyari yung dating nangyari na fiasco dito sa laptop at saka yung iba pang mga nung nakaraan. So paano ba gagawin ng DepEd ngayon ang mga procurement? Ibibigay pa rin ba ito sa PSDS ng DBM? Or you can use your yung sarili ninyong procurement committee?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the department is committed to improve the procurement system of the department and to prevent from untoward incidents from happening again. And in fact, the department has created a procurement strand to focus on the procurement of all items to be procured by the department, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, distinguished sponsor. I hope wala na tayong maririnig na overpriced, na kulang po yung specification doon sa prices. So, i-ensure po ba ng DepEd yung tamang pag-procure tamang pagbili nitong mga equipments na ito. Kasi malaki ito, Mr. Speaker, 8.9 billion.
Mr. Speaker, the department is committed to improve its procurement service. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dito po, doon naman po tayo sa basic education facilities, Mr. Speaker, basic education facilities. Sa 2023 yung mga construction, replacement, completion of school buildings, etc. ay meron dito no na proposal. So from 15 billion in 2023 tapos naging 33.75 billion. So malaki po yung halos doble po yung inilagay doon sa construction, replacement, and completion ng ating mga, kasi ang DepEd po ang nagre-repair. Yung mga building na mga rooms, ayan po ay DPWH. Tama po ba, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the 33 billion mentioned earlier is for the whole basic education facilities program. And this,
Yes.
and this includes the construction of the new building and the repair. So these are categorized into several subcomponents, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you po. Pero meron kayong budget na 15.604 billion, distinguished sponsor, for this year. So what is the status of the utilization? Kasi po, nakaikot po ako sa Cebu, sa Bicol. Nakita natin doon yung naging problema nung nakaraang bagyo, Mr. Speaker. At talagang naghihingi sila talaga ng ng repair, reconstruction ng kanilang mga buildings and rooms. Eh, hindi ko naman po masagot, di ba? Alam niyo naman po yun, Mr. Speaker. So, kailangan siguro na ma-determine natin ano-ano yung mga schools na nangangailangan ng rehab or repair. So, what is the status or the utilization rate of 15 billion in 2023?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, for the new construction of a building, the SARO has already been released and the implementation is ongoing under the Department of Public Works and Highways.
Magkano po
For the repair of classroom, which implementation is under the Department of Education, a portion of SARO amount of the funds amounting to 1.8 billion has already a SARO, and the 3.1 billion is still awaiting for a SARO.
Well, Mr. Speaker, yung utilization rate yung utilization nung 15.604 billion, ang na-utilize pa lang ay more than 100 billion waiting for the SARO. So, magkano po ba yung wini-wait natin na SARO? Kasama po ba ito yung sa 1 billion? Kasi ngayon ay October na, di ba? In 2 days, in 2 or 3 days, October na. So, we are on the 4th quarter.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, with the amount I mentioned earlier on the already available SARO, a portion of that is ongoing, batch 1 is already ongoing procurement, and other projects are still subject to modification. But a portion of that is already being constructed and repaired, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Well, hindi po ako satisfied dun sa sagot, no? Ang sinasabi ko po, based dito sa 15 billion na ito, 1 billion yung, po ito, na ongoing ang construction. So, meron tayong SARO na inaantay. Magkano po itong inaantay natin na SARO for the construction, replacement, and completion of the school buildings and repair po? So, yun po yung tanong ko, distinguished sponsor, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, for the allocation intended for the new construction, the SARO has been released already to the Department of Public Works and Highways for its implementation. And the procurement and implementation is ongoing, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Sige, nalito po ako doon, Mr. Speaker. Ang nakalagay po dito na line item for GAA 2023 is construction, replacement, and completion of school buildings and tech-voc laboratories, installation or replacement of disability access facilities, construction of water and sanitation facilities, and site improvement. Hindi po, yun ang tinutukoy ko na sinasabi nyo new building. So, iba po yan kasi nasa DPWH po yung, yung pondo niyan. So, ito po yung mga rehabilitation and construction po ng mga iba pang mga facilities.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, as earlier mentioned, a portion of that amount has already a SARO, and a portion of that is still awaiting for SARO. And those items with SARO are already being procured, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Okay, in the interest of time, Mr. Speaker, can the distinguished sponsor submit to this representation the accurate report as regards to the utilization of this. Alam niyo na po ito, no? 15.604 billion. Ano po yung may SARO? Ano pa po yung natitira doon sa pondo? Kasi sa NEP, nakita niyo po yung NEP, 33.755 billion po yung proposed. Okay? 33.75 yung proposed, parang dinoble itong budget para sa rehabilitation. Kasi titignan natin dito, Mr. Speaker, ang pagra-rational natin ang pagbibigay ng dagdag na pondo. Kung hindi naman ito na-absorb ng isang department o ng isang agency, so paano ba yon? Kasi alam natin, meron diyang policy and rules ang DBM. So kailangan gusto nating makita yan. At idagdag ko na rin, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, yung plano sa 2024 dito sa mga binabanggit nating construction, replacement, dahil meron po sa 2024 na NEP. Pwede rin po ba yung ibigay sa kinatawang ito at sa committee, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, yes, we will comply and we will submit the data asked by Her Honor.
Well, on the next, thank you, Mr. Distinguished Sponsor, Mr. Speaker. On the electrification of unenergized schools and modernization, electrical systems, and on-grid schools. So in 2023, may budget tayong 503 million. In 2024, meron po tayong 1.2 billion. So na-utilize na po ba itong 503? So what is the status of utilization, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, out of 495 sites for electrification target for this year, 84 sites have been completed, 191 sites still ongoing, and 220 sites on various stages of procurement. Mr. Speaker.
Just the same, can we have a written report on that, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, we will
Okay.
comply, Mr. Speaker.
Meron din dito ang construction of medium-rise school building. Can you describe a medium-rise school building, distinguished sponsor?
Medium rise. Sir Speaker, Your Honor, medium rise building are those buildings with 5 to 12 stories.
5 to 12?
12 stories.
Stories. Okay. May 2 billion kasi dito, Mr. Speaker. Meron ding another proposal na 2 billion sa 2024. May I know the status of the 2023 budget for this, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, for 2023, there was no allocation for the medium rise, only a proposal for 2024 amounting to 2 billion, Mr. Speaker,
Okay.
Your Honor.
Oh, nasa second. I should correct that. So meron kayong proposal na 2 billion. Saan po ito? Meron kayong detalye, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the proposal for a medium rise building will be intended for Pasig, Marikina, and Bacoor.
Okay, thank you po. Meron din ditong mga program on SPED, on ALS, construction and repair, rehabilitation, replacement. Meron kasi tayong kapapasan na batas, Mr. Speaker. Alam ko, isa ang DepEd na dapat na mag-implement. Yung National Academy of Sports. So, meron bang nakalaang budget para dun sa National Academy of Sports? At saka yung isang batas din na inaipasa po natin, yung inclusive education. I mean, yung mga SPED area na gusto nating tayuan ng mga inclusive learning resource centers. May nababasa ako dito, 16 inclusive learning resources. Saan-saan po ito, Mr. Speaker? Anong mga lugar po itong 16?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, on the question of may nakalaan ba tayong proposal for school
National Academy of Sports.
We have a proposal of 195 165,167,000 for 2024.
Okay,
Your Honor.
thank you po kung merong nakalaang budget. Anyway, yung sinasabi pong 16 inclusive learning resource centers, ibigay na lang po sa akin yung report, Mr. Speaker, in the interest of time.
Yes, we will comply,
Okay.
Mr. Speaker.
Yung iba ko pa pong topic, Mr. Speaker, on the reiteration po ng mga complaints ng mga union repression or union paglabag doon sa karapatan ng ating mga teachers for union. So ni-raise ko na po ito sa Civil Service Commission at very positive po ang ang tugon ng Civil Service Commission Chair Chief Carlo Nograles. So ito po Region 6, hindi pa raw sila binibigyan ng DepEd Central ng authority to negotiate with the union. Region 7, walang sagot ang management at busy daw sila, 3 years itong nakabinbin. Region 11, nag-i-impose ng additional requirements ang DepEd para mag-proceed ng negotiation. This is second CNA na ng Region 11. So binanggit ko na rin ito nung briefing, Mr. Speaker. Meron bang tayong update kaugnay nito, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the department's stand on the CNA is that, one, the department is willing to negotiate with for the CNA. And for the regions being mentioned, for Region 6 and 7, the status now is the department is waiting for the request to negotiate and the proposed CNA.
Yes, for
And that is,
Region 6 and 7.
Region
How about
6
itong
and
Region
7?
11?
For
Na
the
tatlong
Region
taon
11,
ito, Mr. Speaker, na 3 taon na nakabinbin yung CNA negotiation nila, na renegotiation na lang naman ito eh.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, according to the records of the department is still waiting for Region 11 to submit the list of its officials, which be included in the proposed CNA.
Officials po ba? I would like to reiterate,
Yes, the updated list of officials of ACT, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you po kasi ang kala ko hinahanap ninyo yung listahan ng mga miyembro ng ACT. So that is pinuna natin yan na that is a violation of the right to organization of an individual.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, what they are waiting is the list of the officials of ACT because they form part of the party where for the negotiation.
Thank you, distinguished sponsor. Meron po rin tayong ni-raise yung service credit ng mga teachers natin. I know merong memo ang DepEd na hindi na lang linilimitahan sa 15 days. Pero i-monitor nyo na lang po yung pag-implement on the ground. At may request din po sana ako na sana ay i-monetize. Bigyan ng karapatan naman yung mga teachers natin na just like the education support personnel, they can monetize the service credits at saka yung PVP. So ni-raise ko rin po ito sa civil service at si Chief Nograles po, as sinasabi niya, ay makikipag-usap siya sa DepEd. So tumawag na po ba ang ating chief ng CSC?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the department will study the said proposal and the discussion, there is already an ongoing discussion on the matter.
Pati po
Mr.
yung
Speaker.
yung rules natin on overtime pay.
We take note of that, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you po. Kasi ang mga teachers, nag-demand sila ng overtime pay during the pandemic. Hindi ito pinansin nung last administration. Hopefully, mapansin ito ng civil service in coordination with the Department of Education, Mr. Speaker.
It's being studied already, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Okay. Next po, yung Teacher Effectiveness and Competencies Enhancement Project, yung TECEP. World Bank project ito na may 120 million US dollars total project cost. Last year, sinubukan ding ponduhan ito ng 602.639 million, pero hindi ito pumasok sa GAA 2023. Though pumasok ito sa unprogrammed appropriation, yung request for that. So it's now 680 plus million. So ano po yung status po nito, Mr. Speaker?
Sir Speaker, may I request for a few minute suspension?
Before the chair suspends, I'd like to the chair would like to remind the gentle lady that she has 3 more minutes. Session suspended.
So wala pa. Sir Speaker.
Session is resumed.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, as of now, there is still no notice of loan proceeds. And it's still under an program.
Thank you, distinguished sponsor. Mr. Speaker, isang topic na lang. Nakakabahala, Mr. Speaker, yung report ng World Bank about the yung sa East Asia at saka sa Pacific, about the Philippines remains to be the poorest in learning in East Asia and the Pacific, with 9 out of 10 Filipinos unable to read and understand simple age-appropriate reading material by age 10. The country scored an identical of 91% learning poverty rate in 2022. In the 2023 World Bank report, however, the Philippines was still among the 8 nations that registered a learning poverty rate higher than 2/3 or 67% despite the return and in-person classes in schools in November 2022. The other 7 are Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, etc. So unable to read. So iyan po at saka yung mga multiple factors that contribute to the learning poverty and learning crisis. So mababasa niyo po yan isa din po sa naging findings ay yung tungkol dun sa sweldo ng ating mga teachers at saka yung mga benefits at saka yung tungkol doon sa career progression. So yun po yung isang mga factor. So meron na po bang ginagawa ang ating Department of Education para po naman maitaas natin yung ating, masolve natin yung ating learning poverty?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the department takes note of these reports, and the department is committed to address these concerns. And in fact, this is the reason why the Matatag agenda and the Matatag curriculum was launched. And under this curriculum, the department is committed for the implementation of the National Learning Recovery Program so as to address these gaps mentioned by Her Honor, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, so isa dito, Mr. Speaker, no, yung motivation ng ating mga teachers. Marami rin sa ating mga teachers, 44% daw nakalagay dito yung absences. At many factors, no, kung bakit nag-absent yung mga teachers. Hindi naman siguro yan uma-attend ng mga rally. So economic factor, yung salary, yung medical condition, etc. So I am glad that the sponsor take note of this, and I hope the Department of Education will make necessary interventions to address this learning crisis. And that ends my interpellation, Mr. Speaker. Magandang hapon muli sa ating lahat.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, next on the list of our interpellators, I move that we recognize Representative Mujib Hataman of the Lone District of Basilan.
The Honorable Hataman of the Lone District of Basilan is recognized to interpolate the sponsor.
Maraming salamat,
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker. Maayong hapon, kapwa Mindanaoan Representative, the distinguished sponsor. Ma'am, maigsi lang ho ang tanong ko. Actually, tatlo lang. Una, magkano ho ang Madaris Education Program natin for 2024?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the department is proposing for 359,503,000 for the Madrasa Education Program.
Ito ho ba, ma'am, ay excluded sa program na to, yung Bangsamoro Autonomous Region? Kumbaga ito, or kasama dito sa program, yung BARM areas?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, that is correct. Excluded po.
Excluded or included?
Excluded, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Ma'am, distinguished sponsor, pwede ano na lang ho, in the interest of time, pwedeng makahingi ng data ng lahat ng eskwelahan na pumasok dito sa programang ito. Kasama na rin ho yung data kung ilan yung Muslim student population na nag-avail dito sa programang ito.
Yes, we will submit and we will comply with the request of His Honor, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, distinguished sponsor. Magkano ho yung school building program natin for 2024?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, is the honorable colleague referring to a budget proposal for BARM or sa lahat?
Actually, pwede na, ma'am, diretso na tayo sa BARM,
Sa BARM.
kasi yun din ang tutunguhin ko actually.
Okay, for Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, for the BARM, for 2023, we have a total allocation for 309 million. And for 2024, under NEP, we have a proposal of 600 million. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Ma'am, etong school building program natin for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, pre-identified ba ito ng central office or lump sum dina-download natin sa BARM at ang nag-identify si MBHTE ng Bangsamoro Autonomous Region?
Okay. Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the fund is a downloaded lump sum, but the identification of the school building is with the central office.
So may list ho tayo ng name of areas allocated by the fund.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Pwedeng humingi ho nung listahan nung ano, hindi ho kailangan ngayon or pwedeng mamaya. At ganun din ma'am, kung pwedeng mahingi ko na rin ho, yung mula sa 2019, do hindi pa ho panahon DepEd, kung meron lang ho tayong listahan mula 2019 up to now.
Yes, we will comply, Mr. Speaker.
Ang program fund ba dina-download natin sa BARM is school building lang o meron tayong ibang program na dina-download na pondo para sa Bangsamoro Autonomous Region?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, for the calendar year 2024, the funds that will be downloaded to BARM is only for the construction of school buildings.
Or SBP lang. So,
Yes,
other
Mr. Speaker.
programs, wala.
Wala na.
Anyway, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, baka pwedeng i-request ko na lang yung data in the interest of time, ho. Halimbawa, kung mula 2019, kasi I'm sure even it is not the time of the BP, pero yung institutional memory, I'm sure yung sa finance meron silang data. From year 2019 up to 2023, ho, kung magkano ang found out. With that, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, I end my interpellation.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, next on the list of our interpellators, I move that we recognize the Honorable Edsel Lagman of the 1st District of Albay.
The Honorable Edsel Lagman of the 1st District of Albay is recognized to interpolate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Distinguished lady, would you yield to some questions?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
This will be a little more lengthy than my questions with respect to the office of the Vice President. I hope you would be patient with my questions. I am certain that the distinguished sponsor knows the idiomatic expression of calling a spade a spade.
Yes, I am aware of that, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
And the idiomatic expression calling a spade is of classical Greek origin, but it gained popularity in Oscar Wilde's novels Dorian Gray and The Importance of Being Earnest. I am also certain that the distinguished sponsor is aware of this.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
The essence of calling a spade is that one must describe a thing, a person, or an event as it is, truthfully, even to the point of brutality. Is this correct?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
For this reason, we call the killing of 13 farmers who demonstrated before Malacañang in 1987, among other 3,000 farmers, as the Mindiola Massacre. Not merely the killings, but Mindiola Massacre. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Even in reference to fictional characters like Father Damaso in Rizal's novel Noli Me Tangere, a prior who represented the avarice as well as the abuse of Filipino maidens. We refer to him not only as Padre or as Damaso, but as Padre Damaso, to emphasize that this is a prior. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Likewise, when we refer to the dictatorship during the martial law regime, we call it the Marcos dictatorship or Dictadurian Marcos. This is not correct.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, may I request His Honor to repeat the question, Mr. Speaker?
Okay. Since the declaration of martial law, 50 years ago, and the ouster of the late President, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., we have called the era under martial law as the Marcos dictatorship or dictaduriang Marcos. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
Madam Speaker, Your Honor.
Why then does the Department of Education, in its matatag curriculum, instruct students to call the Marcos dictatorship only as dictatoria, dropping the name of Marcos? Is this not a scheme to misinform or a historical revisionism to conceal Marcos as a dictator?
Madam Speaker, Your Honor, the Department of Education, in its effort to change the theme, the historical theme, is not to revise the history, but it is to frame a portion of the Araling Panlipunan curriculum which is to focus on historical themes and concepts and not each presidential term, Madam Speaker, Your Honor.
Whatever presidential term, it is important to call a spade a spade. During that Black era, it has been known locally, domestically, and internationally as Marcos dictatorship. Is it not?
Madam Speaker, Your Honor, the history tells us so.
That is our history. Is that correct?
Come again, Madam Speaker.
And that is our history.
History would tell us, that is correct,
Correct.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
And education, the essence of education is to search for knowledge and teach the truth. Is it not?
Mr. Speaker, may I request His Honor to repeat?
The essence of education is to search, is to teach knowledge and instruct the truth. Is it not?
That is correct, Mr.
Okay.
Speaker, Your Honor.
Let me go to, thank you for your candid answers, and let me go to another topic. What is the law which provides for the mandate and power of the Secretary of the Department of Education or the Department of Education itself?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the mandate of the department is provided under Republic Act Number 9155, or otherwise known as the Governance of Basic Education Act of 2001.
And that is correct, distinguished lady. Mr. Speaker, where in Republic Act Number 9155 is the power and mandate of the Department of Education or its secretary provided for?
The mandate. Sorry. May I ask Mr. Speaker for a few minute suspension just to get the exact provision of the Republic Act?
Session suspended.
Mr. Speaker.
Session is resumed.
Mr. Speaker, Section 6 of the said Republic Act covers the mandate of the Department of Education in terms of governance. It shall be vested with authority, the department will be vested with authority, accountability, and responsibility for ensuring access to promoting equity and improving the quality of basic education. Arts, culture, and sport shall be provided for the basic education.
Yes.
Section 7, Mr. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleague, provides for the powers, duties, and function.
Okay.
And the Secretary of the Department shall exercise overall authority and supervision over the operations of the Department.
Now, let me repeat that mandate of the Department of Education. And I quote, under Section 6, as correctly pointed out by the distinguished sponsor, it shall be vested with authority, accountability, and responsibility for ensuring access to, promoting equity in, and improving the quality of basic education. In other words, the principal mandate of the Department of Education is to teach and improve the quality of education in the country. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Speaker, but Section 7 of the said Republic Act also provides that in addition of the power of the Secretary under existing laws, the Secretary shall have authority, accountability, and responsibility for the following, and this includes formulating national educational policies, formulating national basic education plan, promulgating national educational standards, monitoring and assessing national learning outcomes, undertaking national educational research and studies, enhancing the employment status, professional competence, welfare, and working conditions of all personnel of the department, and enhancing the total development of learners through local and national programs and projects. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
And Section 7 must be harmonized with Section 6, which is the principal mandate of the Department of Education. Is that correct?
Is correct, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Okay. Where in Section 6 or Section 7 can we infer that the Department of Education can utilize confidential funds in pursuit of its mandate and power?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, as part of the mandate of the Secretary to formulate national educational policies, it is the intention of the Department through the Secretary that policies that will be formulated will be based on data and information, accurate data and information as basis of policy proposal. The Department again is mandated to provide accessible, equitable, and quality basic education, which includes provision of a safe and enabling learning environment.
Okay.
And because education and national security are individually intertwined, thus the need for gathering of data and information, and hence the need for confidential funds. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
In the formulation of education policies, the inputs should be based on academic, scientific, empirical studies, but not, and in pursuit of this objective, confidential funds are not necessary. To my mind, Mr. Speaker, no stretch of the imagination will make the use of confidential fund by the Department of Education be germane to its mandate and power under the law. Let me end this interpellation by, no, I will not yet end it. I will go back to the mandate of the Department of Education to teach or include in the curriculum the atrocities during martial law and the heroism and sacrifices of its victims and survivors. And this is pursuant to Republic Act number 10368, which provides an act providing for reparation and recognition of victims of human rights violations during the Marcos regime, documentation of such violations, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Is the distinguished lady aware of Republic Act number 10368?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
And under Section 7 of this Act, it reads, the Commission shall also coordinate and collaborate with the Department of Education and CHED to ensure that the teaching of martial law atrocities, the lives and sacrifices of SRBBs in our history are included in the basic, secondary, and tertiary education curriculum. In other words, Mr. Speaker, distinguished lady, the matatag curriculum, which is only an administrative fiat, violates the mandate of this statute. We hope that the Department of Education can revise that matatag curriculum with respect to the atrocities and sacrifices during martial law and call a spade a spade. May we know whether the Department of Education has already complied with its memorandum of agreement with the Commission on Human Rights on including in the curriculum under this act the teaching of martial law atrocities and the sacrifices and heroism of its victims and survivors.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, with respect to the responsibility of DepEd to integrate into the K-12 curriculum the core messages and content on martial law and human rights, they were already articulated in the K-12 curriculum, even in the recent updated K-10 Matatag curriculum. Moreover, the updated K-10 curriculum likewise contains competencies related to human rights, particularly under Learning Strand 5, Understanding Self and Society. For instance, grade 5 and 6 of Araling Panlipunan highlight the dynamism of Philippine history, where in-depth and comprehensive discussion on martial law is emphasized. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Can we cite under what administrative issuance does the Department of Education comply with this mandate under Republic Act 10368? We cannot accept general statements. Let us go to particulars. If there is none, if there is no compliance yet, then we will urge the Department of Education to comply with its mandate under Republic Act number 10368, of which I am the principal sponsor and author.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, there is a MOA between the Department of Education and the Commission on Human Rights, and the department is compliant with the said MOA.
That MOA was signed way back in 2015, and during the budget presentation of the Department of Education, they admitted that they have not complied with that MOA. That is on record, distinguished lady. Now, since the Honorable Her Excellency Vice President Sara Duterte said that she would defer to the wisdom, or to my mind, unwisdom of Congress with respect to the allocation of confidential funds to the office of the Vice President. Will she welcome the reallocation of the 150 million confidential fund to an item of expenditure known as school site acquisition, considering that there is difficulty now in having school sites?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the Secretary of the Department of Education is consistent with her stand that she submits to the discretion of the Congress.
Yes, we know that. That has been repeated, and I said that is throwing back the onus to Congress. But what I am asking now, whether she would welcome the reallocation of her confidential funds to the item of expenditure known as school site acquisition, which is also in her department.
Purchase of Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the stand of the Secretary of the Department is she can only propose for how funds will be utilized, and propose for the implementation of the programs under the department.
Well,
Again, leaving the discretion to the decision of the Congress.
So from that ambivalent answer, we can understand that she does not welcome the reallocation of her confidential funds to the acquisition of a school site as will be proposed in the budget of the Department of Education. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, distinguished lady, for answering my questions. Maraming salamat.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, next on our list of interpellators, I move that we recognize Senior Deputy Minority Leader Paul Daza.
The Senior Minority Deputy Leader, Paul Dasa, is recognized to interpolate the sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon again to everyone. First of all, allow me to thank the department. In the committee hearing, I had asked for a lot of reports and documents. I received them. In fact, I must admit that it was professionally done. It was tabbed and easy to read. So thank you so much for that. But there was one item lacking, and we were told that the enrollment and dropout rates were not yet ready. I'm okay with that, provided that the sponsor, the department, can just give me a timetable, because I think it's very important that we discuss enrollment, dropout, and reasons why students and children drop out from our DepEd schools, and they should be addressed. I think there were many members of the House who expressed similar sentiment. So I just want an assurance that DepEd will be working on those statistics and the results, and just give me a timetable.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the department intends to close the encoding by October 30. And after that, the department can be able to submit the data requested by His Honor. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, our sponsor. I will accept that and be looking forward to those data and statistics. Secondly, from the reports given to me and from the committee hearings, we have a shortage of 165,000 school classrooms, 61,000 healthcare facilities, hand washing equipment, toilets, all sorts of required facilities in our classrooms. And in fact, I appreciated the candid answers during the committee hearings by no less than the Vice President that the funding requirements for the shortages is tremendous. It was actually, it was overwhelming. Would that be a fair statement to make from the committee hearing?
That is an accurate statement, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I wanted to tie this into a very good program that DepEd has, which is called the Government Assistance and Subsidies, what we call GASP, the voucher system. Students who go to private schools in areas where the public school system is overloaded are given vouchers to support those private facilities. My understanding is we have a budget of about more or less for grade 7 to grade 12. It's about 37 billion pesos for 2024. Is that more or less the ballpark figure?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the department is proposing for 39,333,000,000 for 2024.
Okay. Now, the title is Government Assistance and Subsidies. I just wanted to propound to the sponsor and to the department that it might be time for a paradigm shift on our thinking, because no less than the Vice President and the officials had said that the shortages is so overwhelming, it's large amounts. So we have various laws. Most administrations have advocated public-private partnership. The way I look at the GASP program is really a public-private partnership. So instead of maybe thinking it as a subsidy, and because in the private sector, if you put students in private facilities, they have classrooms, you already have the toilets, the hand-washing facilities, and it's a lot faster to do that. So what are the thoughts of the department in taking a look at this program and really look at it as a PPP to fast-track at least reducing the shortages in classrooms, healthcare facilities, and others?
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the department will take note of the suggestion of our distinguished colleague, and in line with the recognition of the department on the shortages of classroom and the need for partnership with the private sector, studies are being made on how to improve the said program.
Mr. Speaker, for the information of the DepEd, the Universal Access to Tertiary Education, Republic Act 10931, which was passed during the time no less than the father of the Vice President, is such a good law. And that law made it free tuition for state colleges, and it had another component where living allowance and what we call tertiary educational subsidies is given to poor students in private colleges. So even in the tertiary education, we already have the law for that, and we're funding it. So I wanted to encourage DepEd to see how maybe we can tweak the GASP program and find areas with either no public schools or that are overloaded, and find good private schools and then find ways to increase the budget. I would be satisfied if the sponsor will just say that they will put it in their agenda to take a look at it and maybe give the Speaker, Committee on Appropriations, and myself a report that they considered it and looked at all the angles as a possibility in at least reducing the very shortages that we have.
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the department will include this in the legislative agenda of the department for submission to Congress, for Congress to act and propose for appropriate laws for this matter, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you very much for that to my distinguished colleague. I had asked if the department will remember, I had asked questions if the department is familiar with the free public Wi-Fi program. It's a law that mandates free public Wi-Fi in DepEd schools, barangays, state universities, and I had asked for statistics, and that was given to me. Thank you very much. It seems to be that more or less, depending on which region, what area, anywhere from 50 to 60% of our DepEd schools have Wi-Fi already, which is, I think, good news. Now, my question is, because I have a strong suspicion, because DICT is somewhat underutilizing their funds. So my question is, who is paying for the connectivity, internet connectivity, of those 50 to 60% of the schools you reported that had internet connection?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, for the payment of the connectivity, it's with the Department of Education and the LGU through its Special Education Fund.
Could you kindly repeat that, please? I didn't hear. It's the DepEd that's paying for the internet connectivity in the schools?
That is correct, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. DepEd is paying for the connectivity through the MOE given to the schools, or other sources are from the SEF of the
Okay.
LG.
I was afraid that you were going to confirm that, and that should not be the case. Under the law, DICT has substantial amounts that's supposed to provide and pay for the connectivity of our DepEd schools. In fact, the spectrum user fee is now about 21 billion pesos. So, because I want to help DepEd, because you have so many problems, and I want to be solutions-oriented instead of just always crying and pointing out problems. So I hope that the department will take a look at that, engage DICT, and I'm sure the Committee on Appropriations will be more than happy to help you, because there is funding for the internet connectivity, and it's based on a law. It's a legal mandate. What are the thoughts of the department and the sponsor on that?
We appreciate, Your Honor, for bringing that up, and we hope that we can improve the implementation of the Wi-Fi connectivity, especially in terms of payment of the connectivity, if the Committee on Appropriations or any other agencies, or the ICT for that matter, will work closely with the department.
So my request, Mr. Speaker, is for the department, because the Vice President, I'm sure, sits in the cabinet, the Secretary of the DICT sits in that same cabinet. There's no reason for them not to discuss it and find funding solutions so we can reduce the MOE and DepEd expenditures and use those spectrum user fee funds that's available, because it doesn't make sense to me that we're putting the burden on the principals and the schools for connectivity when the law mandates that DICT pays for that.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, for record, there are already 944 public school that are connected through the ICT Wi-Fi. And per record, this number is not sufficient, and the Department of Education is working closely with the ICT.
Okay, thank you for that. But 944 out of how many schools nationwide?
Out of 47,000 schools, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
So it's not substantial performance on the DICT part. But, you know, we're giving them the elbow room because they're a fairly new agency, and so we're also trying to help them fast-track this program. So I just want an assurance and maybe a request from the department that they will take this up with the ICT and maybe just give us a report in the Committee on Appropriations sooner than later, and I will be satisfied if the department will assure us that they will engage the ICT and just give us a report whenever they can within the next few months.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, there are regular meetings being conducted between the Department of Education and
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I was personally disappointed the last 2 years. As we all know, malnutrition is a big problem in our country, and DepEd is in a critical role because many of our children are underweight, stunted, and I'm happy that the President, I think in the last SONA, mentioned that this was a priority. The budget for the school-based feeding program, which includes milk for the children, is very good. It was $6 billion in 2021. It was reduced to 3.3 in 2022 because of the pandemic. Revenues, I guess, went down. But it's back up again for 2024, and rightfully so, which is 11.7 billion. So my question is, because there were implementing issues before, so I want the sponsor to share with us the improvements in the school-based feeding program that will address head-on the malnutrition facing many of our students.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, these are several improvements in the school-based feeding program, and this includes implementation of the program through Central Kitchen, pre-engagement certification for suppliers and government partners, food safety training, cluster mapping and suppliers forum, local collaboration with the local government units to extend feeding program, localized procurement for the school-based feeding program supplies, proposal to expand feeding to 220 days, and a proposal to increase unit cost per meal per learner from 20 pesos to 25 pesos. These are some of the initiatives being made by the department to improve the school-based feeding program, Mr. Speaker. Your Honor.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm hoping that the department, and no less than the Secretary and the Vice President, will really be at the forefront and push this. It will help many, many needy and poor students in our country. So thank you for sharing those substantial improvements in the implementation of the program. My last question is, recently, DepEd and GSIS entered into a memorandum of agreement. Some parts of it I think was good. They reduced interest rate for salary loans of teachers, but it extended repayment up to 15 years. Now, I'm at a dilemma to bring this, but I think I owed it to the department and to the teachers to at least bring this up. Is it really good policy to extend repayment period, because there are many cases teachers retire and there's really no benefit they're going to get because GSIS just basically takes all the retirement benefits to pay off the loan. So my question is, aren't we creating a culture, a borrower's culture, a culture of indebtedness? What are the thoughts of the good sponsor?
Sir Speaker, may I request for a few minutes?
Session suspended.
Mr. Speaker.
Session is resumed.
The extension of loan, as mentioned by His Honor, which we call it's a GSI, is a GSIS policy and not part of the Memorandum of Agreement of DepEd and GSIS. The said scheme is actually proposed by GSIS to all government workers and not to teachers alone. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Okay, I wanted to bring this out because I know many of the teachers have emergencies, they need loans, and in some cases maybe the GSIS facility is advantageous. But I'm just concerned that we're now allowing them to borrow such a long period of time that it might have a counterproductive or a counterintuitive result where we're encouraging more teachers to borrow, and then when they retire, they have no retirement benefits because GSIS will just end up using that to pay off the loans. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the response of the sponsor. I just wanted to highlight that, and I'll leave it up to the department to maybe rethink if they think it's in their wisdom that should be rethought out. But there's one other issue that I think the department should know about. If the articles I read is correct, DepEd assigns loan verifiers that help teachers who are borrowing from GSIS. My understanding, these are DepEd employees, and they're called verifiers. Is that correct?
Ano yun? That is correct, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Okay. Is it also true that these verifiers are getting some sort of incentive or compensation from the GSIS?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, based on the record of the department, they only get personal accident insurance cover from the GSI.
Okay, I just wanted to give the department a heads up because I think we all support DepEd. There's just no way you cannot support Department of Education. I wanted to give the officials a heads up because as many of us know, there's a prohibition on double compensation. I think we all know that. All government officials are prohibited from getting two compensations. So if they are DepEd employees and then getting some sort of cash or in-kind benefit from GSIS, I would hate to see DepEd officials face legal issues down the road. I just wanted to highlight that and let the sponsor and the officials know that there could be a legal concern on that arrangement.
Mr. Speaker, the department will look into it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Honorable Zamora for her graciously answering many difficult questions this afternoon. I thank the Vice President for being here with us personally and the other DepEd officials. Thank you for those responses. And having no more members of the minority who wishes to propound questions, I move that we terminate the period of sponsorship and debate for the budget of DepEd, including all the attached agencies for the fiscal year 2024.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, if this representation may be allowed for my closing statement as the sponsor.
Yes, please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, as we conclude our deliberations on the Department of Education budget, we acknowledge the paramount role that education plays in shaping our country's future. We have no less than the second highest elected official of the land and the Vice President leading the department. The Vice President brings with her a responsive and transformative synergy directed towards ensuring the well-being and security of both learners and educators alike. It is amply clear to all our investment in education today determines the success and prosperity of our nation tomorrow. The DepEd is mandated to ensure the provision of accessible, equitable, and quality education for all. The department strives to create and sustain an educational system that equips our learners with the skills and knowledge necessary to participate effectively in society, laying the foundation for them to contribute to economic development and lead fulfilling lives. All of these necessarily include the provision of a safe and enabling learning environment. Education and national security are inevitably intertwined. Our schools are confronted by threats of recruitment to terrorist and extremist groups, drug trade, sexual abuse, child pornography, as well as organized criminal activities and scams against our learners, teachers, and non-teaching personnel. The sobering reality is that confidential funds are necessary in gathering intelligence for the formulation and implementation of target programs, activities, and projects to combat threats to security in our school and for our personnel. But for our part, Congress, in the exercise of its powers, balances fiscal responsibility with our commitment to providing quality education for all. This allocation will empower our schools to innovate, enhance infrastructure, foster skilled educators, and ensure accessibility to education across diverse communities. Again, the department submits to the wisdom of Congress in determining the investment in our learners. Thank you, dear colleagues, and thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Sponsor. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, on the part of the majority, we join the minority in the motion to terminate the interpellations on the proposed budget of the Department of Education, including attached agencies. So moved.
Is there any objection? Chair hears none. Motion's approved. The budget deliberations for the Department of Education is hereby terminated. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we suspend session for a few minutes.
Session is suspended.
Display lang ako dito.